Well, it seems like I might have ruffled a few feathers with my latest video on MGTOW. Some people have taken definite issue with some of the points and criticisms that I made in my video a couple of days ago, and I want to address some of those criticisms and arguments in this video today. So, after climbing out from underneath my weighted blanket, drinking a tall glass of cold soy milk, and making sure that my wife and her boyfriend are asleep, I am going to go through a few of the arguments and criticisms that I have gotten on my video over the last couple of days and kind of talk about them and see if I can actually start a productive conversation. Now, I am going to deal with these criticisms and arguments in a fair and respectable way, but I will probably be making a few jokes throughout the video because otherwise it's just not really entertaining for me and for like the rare person that does find me funny. But I will always follow up those jokes with an actual argument. So just to give a quick summary of the things that I said in that video, which I will link in the description below, my main point was that men are searching for self-improvement and they find the MGTOW group. And upon getting there, despite the fact that they have come for self-improvement and support and community, they find themselves bombarded with messages that are just, you know, hating on women and hating on feminism. And there are even a lot of extreme far-right talking points that get espoused there that are nothing to do with helping men or raising men up when men have been through something bad in their lives. And so whilst I agree with men going their own way in principle, and I go over this a lot more in the video that I put out yesterday, I do think that there are some valid criticisms of the way that MGTOW is structured and going about its business now. And that's what I'm going to kind of be going through, as well as responding to some of the points that were made in the comments of this video. So the first point that I got was that MGTOW is not a movement, it is a philosophy. And first of all, this just kind of sounds like MGTOW is the I'm not like the other girls of the manosphere. But jokes aside, this is a very strange point to kind of bring me up on. Because it just seems like an issue of semantics more than anything else, because a movement can very easily be defined as a group of people who share a social or a political or an artistic agenda that they want to explore together. And I think that MGTOW can very easily fall within that category and within that definition. However, if it is preferable that I refer to MGTOW as a philosophy rather than as a movement, then that is what I'll do going forward. Even though MGTOW is characterized by literally going in another direction, so technically a movement, but again, that's just a load of semantics, isn't it? It was also brought up in opposition to my calling MGTOW a movement, that a movement has leaders and it has members, it can be banned and people can be put on lists. What those lists were was not clearly stated. I assume this is referencing to like the r/MGTOW ban, but the fact that movements have to have leaders or membership list is of course not correct. It's neither a necessary nor sufficient condition of something being a movement, to use the proper logical terminology. But again, if you would prefer for me to call it a philosophy, then I'm happy to do that. The second point that I want to go through is the idea that MGTOW is not about hate, it's not about women, it's just about exposing women's lies. And really, first off, MGTOW is by definition about women. If you go onto the vast majority of forums, of websites, of YouTube channels, of podcasts, then you have got like a 99.99% chance that they're going to be talking about women, despite the fact that MGTOW is supposed to kind of be about walking away from society as well as relationships and women. So you would expect that there would be kind of an equal split, but maybe there could be an argument that these are things that can't necessarily be extracted from one another, but that's not the argument that I'm seeing made. Secondly, can you really honestly say that the most vocal proponents of the MGTOW philosophy are not people who are just generally going out and spreading rather hateful rhetoric towards women or feminism? And I'm not talking about critical analysis, I'm talking about what often just seems to be pure vitriol. Because like I'm more than happy to sit down and like critique the ways that feminism kind of messes up sometimes, or the way that like Twitter and Tumblr feminists really just make everything look way worse than it actually is. Like I'm so happy to sit down and have a conversation about how like just cringy that is, and I'm even willing to sit down and have a conversation about why society is super messed up, and also in the ways that women are also quite hypocritical. Like I'm happy to sit down and have those conversations because I'm not an idiot, but I have those conversations without the necessary condition of just spewing hateful rhetoric towards women and feminism and whatever else it is at the time that has caught MGTOW's fancy. So I don't think anyone could honestly say that the most vocal proponents of MGTOW are not just trying to trap men into this feedback loop of anger and frustration at women and feminism. And when I questioned the commenter that brought this up on this, he of course never responded to that at all. So whilst I'm perfectly willing to point out and criticize bad actors and people acting in bad faith and just people who are just kind of cringe, on my side, he doesn't seem willing to do the same, and I've noticed a similar trend across MGTOW on the whole. As for the lies that women are telling, I'm more than happy to be educated on that. I could always use more content for the channel, so I'm happy to be educated on what those lies are, and then we can start a conversation with that. Point number 3 seemed to be a point about worldwide inequality, which you are not going to find me disagreeing with. Because again, in this comment, we can quite clearly agree that society is set up in a way that is designed to strip money and time and resources, and yes, even people's lives away from them. And all of this is to benefit the people at the top. What we seem to disagree on is exactly who is at the top. So whilst I would perhaps hesitantly guess that he believes, and that a lot of people in MGTOW believe, that it is women and feminists who are kind of at the top, kind of pulling the puppet strings of the world, and that they're the ones that are stripping time and money and resources and human life away from men. I would argue from my like filthy lefty perspective that it is rather the kind of the billionaires and the politicians and the elites who are kind of demonstrably controlling everything, and that they are the ones who are extracting as much labor and value out of people as possible, and then kind of replacing them with another cog in the great industrial machine once all the goodness has been kind of sucked out of the person who is involved in that exchange. But I'm willing to talk about that, whether or not it is the capitalists or the feminists that are running the world. At the very least, we can both take solace in the fact that we at least don't believe in the Jewish question, or at least I hope we don't. Okay, point 4 was about men and suicide, and I'll admit I actually didn't quite understand the comment that he made on this. It was the 21 Fathers thing in Australia, which I have to go and look into a little bit more. I think I misunderstood what this comment was about. I thought it was a comment on suicide on the whole. I was literally coming home to film this, and I was listening to a podcast that actually brought this up, and I was like, oh, that's what he's talking about. Okay, I misunderstood. I'll go and educate myself on that, and I'll come back and I'll probably make a video on that too, because content. But if you have been around on my channel for a little while, you know literally anything about me, you'll know that I talk about men and suicide quite a lot. Because around 1 million people commit suicide worldwide every single year, and up to 75%, somewhere between 66 and 75% of those suicides are going to be committed by men. And this is something that I take extremely seriously. I have dealt with being very suicidal myself. And yeah, this is something that I take very, very seriously. It is something that is an epidemic amongst men, and we do have to deal with it. So I hope that this is something that we could kind of reach across the aisle and talk about and actually propose solutions to it. So just to be clear, I don't want to address the 21 Fathers thing just yet because I don't fully understand it, and I would want to look into it a little bit more before I started talking about whether or not divorce courts and family courts are directly causing men to commit suicide. I do know that men who are divorced are more likely to commit suicide, and this is something I actually admitted in the comment that I responded to, because it is an interesting thing to talk about. Like, why does that happen? However, there are dozens, maybe even hundreds of additional factors that need to be taken into account, and saying that men are committing suicide purely because of one thing is really reductive, and it does a disservice to the actual goal of helping men and kind of understanding why men are taking their lives at such an alarming rate. Now, where we disagree again is the fact that MGTOW Matty, as his name is, says that if this was happening to women, he says that if instead of it being 21 fathers or 21 men committing suicide every single week, it was in fact 21 women on like a tour bus that was being driven off of a cliff every single week, then it wouldn't happen for a second week in a row. I feel like you probably could have done a little bit better drawing some like equivocation there, because it kind of seems like an apples and oranges thing, but I'm willing to kind of go along with that. And so your point seemed to be that if that was happening to women, then like we would stop it like straight away. And whilst I kind of commend your kind of optimism about how society deals with massive epidemic problems, I don't really think that this is the case, because for the absolute longest time we have let all sorts of bad stuff happen to women, and we seem to be doing absolutely nothing about it. And this isn't me trying to play whataboutism, but our society really isn't fair, and we should do something about it. The example that I put forward in my comment was more or less like, of course we would let this happen. Women face the majority of sexually violent crimes, and in spite of that, convictions are really, really low. Like, arrests are low, convictions are low, and actual jail time is incredibly low for the amount of sexual assault and rape crimes that are reported to the police every single year. And yes, I know there's going to be some people that are going to be like, oh well, you know, a lot of those are false rape claims, and even if we kind of stipulate that, yeah, like 50% of them are false, which is kind of absolutely untrue. There is no data to back that up. Even like if we were to kind of commit to that extreme thing, like it doesn't account for why the conviction rate is so incredibly low for when it is quite clear that something has happened. So yeah, I think society really would let that happen, because society lets bad stuff happen to groups of people literally all the time. So instead of us doing like the Spider-Man meme, we're all just pointing at each other, like let's actually do something about the problems instead of just saying, oh well, it's their fault. I will make this criticism of feminists, and I will make this criticism of MGTOW, because just pointing fingers and trying to say it's the other group's fault isn't solving the problem. Point number 5 was a bit of a weird one, because he kind of went into it with a non sequitur about how men should be able to call women whatever they want, because women go on slut walks, so therefore he should be allowed to call women sluts. And this isn't something that I want to like delve too deep in, because it's probably for somebody with a little bit more of an academic mind than me. All I've really got is like glasses and the British accent to make me sound smart, and very little else. But my understanding of like reclaimed words is that whilst these words are now being used by the side that the words was kind of being used to demonize in the past, it is a word that still has a lot of like political and social and like historical context. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that you shouldn't say the word or that you can't say the word, because like who am I to tell you really how to speak? Like, that's none of my business. It's probably not something that I would say, because I have a little bit more awareness of like the social and political and historical context of the term. What I will say is that there is probably a vast difference in intention with the way that the word is used. Like, there's a vast difference in intention, like if I were to call my ex-girlfriend a slut, than it would be if my ex-girlfriend went and joined like the slutwalk movement, or slutwalk philosophy, if you will. And I did get a few other comments here and there, but the thing that interested me most of all is that no one seemed to want to actually engage with the arguments. I had like 2 people that said that they could refute my arguments within the first minute, and I was like, great, I'm waiting. And I'm still waiting. There were, of course, a few insults thrown in there, you know, soy boy, etc. Like, nothing I've not ever heard before. I did get compared to Alex Jones, which was pretty funny. I got told that I was a conspiracy theorist because I believe that feminism is good, which isn't something that I actually said in my video at all. I think feminism has as many problems with it as a lot of other things. And I'm happy to talk about that, because I'm not some kind of deranged Tumblr SJW. Like, I would consider myself to be a pretty reasonable guy. Mostly I make these videos for fun and because I want to help men. And yeah, like I said, I'm perfectly willing to have these conversations. In fact, I want to have these conversations because, as I've said in my 2 videos on the subject, I don't think that men going their own way is a bad idea. I do think that men should figure out who they are when they are extracted from society and relationships and women. I think that men should be defining themselves by kind of actually who they are, rather than who they are in opposition or in kind of the context of society, relationships with women, etc. I think it's a good thing to go your own way and to find your own direction in life. If you do think that I am mischaracterizing or misrepresenting the MGTOW philosophy in any way, I'm open to criticism. I'm open to being argued against. I don't even mind if you dislike the video, because literally any kind of engagement really helps on YouTube, actually. Like the video that I did in there, like my videos never get more than like 5 to 10 views, and the fact that it got like 100 views in the first 24 hours, which is really, really little in the grand scheme of things, but like massive compared to what I usually get, because like nobody watches my videos. I'm a nobody. But the fact that it kind of got out to the level that it did, kind of relative to what my kind of views normally are, means I might have struck on something here. So like I want to have these conversations, and I really do welcome any criticism. All I would ask is that you actually respond to the things I said, not gesture vaguely and kind of infer points that I haven't actually made in my videos. Like, actually engage with what I've said. Once again, I'm not hating on MGTOW. I think men going their own way is a good idea on the face of it. It's a good philosophy to have, to not define yourself by society and relationships and women. That's good. That's a good thing for men to do. But I do think that it probably should divorce itself a little bit away from the hateful rhetoric and the kind of vitriol towards all women, because it really doesn't do the philosophy any kind of benefit in terms of optics and whatever. Anyway, at this point, I'm kind of just rambling. So I'm going to cut the video here. Yeah, come at me with any like actual criticisms and stuff like that. Or if you do have like insults, please just make them creative. Yeah, thank you very much for watching, and I look forward to seeing you back here on this channel very soon.